All right, wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. Today we are honored to be joined by Coach Bobby McGee, a world-renowned running coach with over 3 decades, maybe 4 decades of experience in endurance sports. A 7-time Olympic coach, Bobby has worked with 9 Olympic medalists, helping shape the careers of elite athletes like Barb Lindquist, Gwen Jorgensen, and Flora Duffy, who became the world's top-ranked triathlete, with him being a key part of their high-performance teams. Bobby's first medalist was a gold in the marathon at the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. Josia Thungwane. You're going to have to help me with that pronunciation, Bobby, but
Yep, I
please correct me
will.
later.
Yes.
Known for blending science with intuition, Bobby's innovative training methods have transformed runners at every level. Get ready to gain insights from one of the most respected minds in our sport. Welcome, Coach Bobby McGee. We're glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you guys. It's always a pleasure. Really looking forward to it. And Josiah, sweet little man that he is, his name is pronounced Josia Thungwane. And Josiah was not able to read by the time he got to the Olympics or write. And so he wrote his name phonetically, Josaya. And he asked me to help him spell his name correctly. So we chose the simplest form, just Josia. Now, of course, Josiah can read and write, very, very intelligent, very successful man.
What a fascinating story, and shows the connection and the relationship that you have with your athletes. Before we get into our formal questions, Bobby, we would love to do a little icebreaker with you called Two Truths and a Lie. We're going to ask you for 3 statements about yourself or your practice as a coach. You give us those 3 statements, please. There should be 2 truths and 1 lie in this bunch. Coach April and I will try to pick out the lie from the bunch. We'll also even ask our listeners to go ahead and put in the chat what they think your lie is. Whenever you're ready, better grab a pen and paper. We're ready.
All right, I'm good to go. So
All
my
right.
first statement is my real name is Robert. My second statement is I speak 2 languages. And my third statement is my best sport personally was field hockey.
Coach April, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
I think I'm going to go first. I think that number one is the truth or the lie. I think that your real name is Bobby, and I think the others are the truth. That's where I'm
I'm going
going
to.
with.
I like that too, but I actually, and I don't know why I feel this way. I feel like in something I've read that is actually not your real name, and it's actually a nickname. So I'm going to go with number one as a lie, also, but for different reasons. So, Bobby, would you please reveal what the lie was?
Correct. Not for April's reasons, but for your reason. Because my last name is McGee, and the 1974 Janis Joplin song was me and Bobby McGee. I got the nickname at university, and I became Bobby all those years ago.
I love
Well,
that.
I do love that. I love that insight story. Okay, so now you need to help us get a little bit more detail here. Your best sport athletically, personally, was field hockey. Tell us about that. When was that? And like what position did you play? And
Yeah, I played field hockey probably from about 1968 to about 1981. And I got up into the majors, the South African majors of field hockey. I did not play for the national team. I played for the second team, and I was a goalkeeper, was a goaltender.
so
Wow.
what was the worst? Did you actually experience any injuries yourself personally as a goalie playing field hockey?
Oh yeah, a lot. Probably about 5 broken noses, couple of concussions, bunch of broken fingers. Yeah, it's a rough position.
Well, that's fun. And your second truth was two. Can't read my own handwriting.
Two
Yeah.
languages.
Oh, 2 languages. Yeah, please tell us what languages.
So I speak English, obviously, but my mom was Afrikaans speaking, and so it's a Dutch derivative language that a number of South Africans speak, and
Wow.
as a result, I can understand Dutch definitely, and then have a good take on Norwegian and on German and things like that because it's the same root, but it's a very pidginized language now. It's a very old language.
Fascinating. And have you ever gotten a chance to use that in coaching athletes?
Yes, very much so. So very much in my formative years as a coach, at least half of my coaching was in Afrikaans. Correct.
Before we pivot into our questions, I just want to call it a comment here. This is from one of our coaches, Coach Carey. If you think about it, you are still a goaltender. You're just tending to the goals of your athletes.
I love that. Thank you so much. That's very kind and very, very accurate. Yes.
All right, I will lead off the first question here, and then April and I will go back and forth. So I guess I'll be the evens, and you could be the odds, April. Coach Bobby, you've been coaching since the early 1980s. What initially drew you into endurance sports, and how has your coaching philosophy evolved over the decades?
Well, my dad was a very keen sports viewer, right? He loved all his sports. He played rugby and ran cross country in high school. So while I was at boarding school, he used to cut out all the clippings out of the newspapers about boxing and about cycling and about all these things, right? Triathlon only started for me. I think the first time I took an interest was like 1978. So it was a little later to the party. And then when I graduated quite young, I was in university by the time I was 17. And my dad asked me what did I want to do at college, and I said sport. But he said, apartheid was around, so there was no international sport. So the only pathway to get into sport was either coaching, which was quite a part-time job. In those days, all the teachers were coaches. And so I said, I want to do sports. So therefore, I want to go to university, become a teacher so that I can coach after hours. So pretty much from day one, I wanted to be a coach. And then I was drawn to the endurance events because I was a better endurance athlete than I was at anything else. Not that I was very good at that either. But I had all those goals to break 2 minutes for the 800 and all those kind of things when I was in high school. And so I went to university to study, and then I went to teach. And during teaching, I started learning how to coach distance runners more specifically. And so then after teaching for 4 or 5 years, I went back to college and did post-grad work in exercise science, focusing exclusively on endurance events. So it's been around for a long time. I'm one of those few people that still use my degree to this day.
That's well said, Bobby. So I love your story, and the tagline of your coaching mantra is grace, gratitude, guts, which is very powerful, and it's also really aligned with ours, which is get gritty. Um,
Okay. Yep.
yes. Can you share how these values influence your approach to coaching and athlete development?
Yeah, I think that, I kind of broke them down when I was thinking about this question. And I was an English lit major as well. So the whole concept of grace, both from a mechanic standpoint and looking good while you are, doing competition was always important to me. So as a phys ed student, you're always looking at how people are moving. Even to this day, we'll be driving down the road and somebody will be jogging along the sidewalk, and my wife would say, oh, give the poor person a card, let them, because they're clearly not. So grace is a big thing for people that watch us compete, right? And then of course grace under pressure, the psycho-emotional component, the spiritual component, is to do these things with grace, to either succeed or fail with grace. So that's where the grace part came about. The gratitude came a long time ago, and it's very interesting now that one of the primary directives that life skill coaches as well as sports psychologists use is the concept of gratitude, having a gratitude journal and so on. And the way that I interpreted was that if you are grateful for what you have, you can have an abundance mentality, and it's so much easier to move forward. So whether that was sport or whether that was life, gratitude seemed to be a primary for me. And then guts definitely encapsulates grit and all those sort of things. And then in the last, since about 6 months before the Tokyo Olympics, and this was 6 months before 2020, not 6 months before 2021 with COVID. So about 18 months before the actual games, I was working with a sports psychologist by the name of David Spindler, and he was working with the German, he's an Australian guy, and he was working with the German cycling team. And he had come across something that we've known about for a while in business and in other forms of psychology, called the thrive mentality, but Nassim Taleb called it anti-fragility. And one of the warnings that Taleb speaks about in anti-fragility is that it's such a powerful mindset, it's such a powerful tool that you actually have to be careful with other people that are fragile if you are anti-fragile. And what David discovered was by using heart rate variability, he could pinpoint what were the limitations for athletes. And these limitations, I think Mike Tyson came up with that, the current world ultramarathon female champion came up with that, is the concept of thriving on the very hardest stuff. So finding out what's hard for you and then spending as much effort as you possibly can to learn to love that. So Mike Tyson, for example, didn't like physical conditioning work. And he would just say to himself, it's got to be my favorite thing. I'm going to make this my most favorite thing. I'm going to make it my priority, and I'm going to love it, and I'm going to tell everybody how much I love it. So that's taking the grit and the guts to the next level, right? Which is thriving on the hard stuff, even to the point where things that are uncomfortable that you voluntarily take on board cannot really be called pain unless you are a masochist or something like that, right? But we don't do things because they're painful. We do things because they're a gateway for us to deal with that level of intensity. And so when you start messing around with the semantics of the word pain, you can have a tremendous amount of breakthroughs, especially if you add the word, oh, wait a minute, this is voluntary. Nobody's forcing me to do this. I can't complain about it as pain. And so that's how this whole guts thing has been coming along for like 15 years.
Wow, Bobby, that was amazing. I was so deep in your explanation throughout that, but the one thing that really resonated with me was the gratitude and the coming at sport from a position or a mindset of abundance, versus you know limitations already
Yeah,
just
the gap
changes
versus the gain.
the gap
Yep.
versus the gain. Exactly.
Mhm.
Well, wonderful. All right, so I want to talk about some of your work with professional triathletes. You have worked with Olympic triathletes like Barb Lindquist and world champions like Gwen Jorgensen. This is a two-part question. We're going to start with this first part. What distinguishes these elite athletes at that level, and how do you tailor your coaching to meet their unique needs versus your age grouper unique needs?
Yeah, I have an answer for that. That's not normally the stock answer. And Josia comes into this answer, right? And it's just as often as much responsibility to coach an age grouper as it is to coach a pro. For the simple reason that some pros are doing this because they're very talented at it. They have the mindset, they have the approach, they have the engines to be able to be successful. And when they are no longer successful, they'll probably not do it anymore. There are some pros like that. And having grown up working with African runners where they could win the London Marathon and earn 10 years of salary in one go. It's very hard for them to keep going after that, or when they lose form. I remember Josia saying to me one day at a training camp up in the northeast of the country, we just done a 30K run and at altitude, and they've been ticking along at about 5:05 pace. And I was on the mountain bike giving them water bottles and stuff. And when I was done, I threw my bike against the wall of the house, went inside, took off my cycling shorts, came out in running shorts, and I was going to go for a quick 5-mile run. And Josia said to me, Bobby, what's your best time for 10K? And I said, just a shade under 35 minutes, Josia. And he said, how long have you been running, Bobby? And I said, since 1968. And he said to me, Bobby, you can stop now. You're not going to get good. You've been trying long enough. So, that's that different mindset. But with the pros, it's all encompassing. It's all in. It's massive. They're training 35, 40 hours a week, sometimes 45 hours if you add all the little bits and pieces, right? So they're working a work week at their sport. The rewards are huge, the disappointments are huge. And so it's just an all-in thing. And whenever I'm on the road with elite athletes, you get that sense, right? I wake up hours before I need to wake up because I'm thinking of everything that needs to be done and making sure that they have what they need. So it's just a little bit more intense. And I'm quite glad in pro sports, and I know this is still a challenging thing for a number of coaches, but I'm so glad that AI is there for the simple reason that you have this information that you fed it that comes from a myriad sources that we in the old days used to spend time traveling all over the world, interviewing coaches, trying to get as much information as we possibly could get. It just doesn't forget, and it collates it, and it has it available there. So it really, really empowers you. But that the pros, that's what's different with the pros. But if you have an age grouper who's trying to do something to the very best of their ability. I remember going to Comrades Marathon Talks, which is the biggest ultra marathon in the world. And there'd be, lawyers and dentists and doctors and all sorts of people in the audience. And I would say to them, at this point in time, the Comrades Marathon is way more important than your job. Am I right? And they would all drop their heads in embarrassment. But it's true. It's so much more important to them than their jobs on that sphere. So they're trying to be self-actualized. They're trying to be the best version of themselves with something. And that's a tremendous responsibility when somebody asks you to help them with that. It requires all your attention, right? It's a privilege and an honor. And so in that way, it's no different working with age groupers and pros.
Wow. I love that answer. And I'm going to ask you to just tuck this away. If we get a gap in questions later on, I want to ask you if you would tell us about what was going through your head when you were watching Gwen Jorgensen on the 10K of her performance in Rio. So,
yeah.
Okay. So we'll just put a pin in that for later. Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
All right,
Bobby, there was something that I wanted to share that just listening to you speak about your experience with both Olympians and age groupers. There was the first conversation I had with you was at TriDot Pool School in Boulder, and I had asked you, who do you typically like to work with more, age groupers or Olympians? And one of the things that stuck out to me was the response you gave, which blew my mind and really just endeared me to you, is that you enjoy working with age groupers the same, if not more, because of their willingness to work and the improvements that you can see and the things that you unlock with them. And I just wanted to share that was so inspiring to me, because it can be intimidating talking with a coach that has that range of profile clientele, but to hear that you get just as much, if not more, enjoyment and personal satisfaction, if you will, working with age groupers, I think that's massive. So I wanted to say that to you too. Can you share? Yeah, go ahead.
It's just amazing. I used to go every year for about 10 years to the Peachtree Road Race in Atlanta. And I'd have a couple of age groupers, but mostly I just had some pros in the race. something occurred to me, and I don't think it was just a spontaneous occurrence. It was, I think somebody said something, that the person who's optimizing their performance might be coming 92,000th in this race, but they have got everything out of themselves. And that sort of further illustrates that performance of running a 67-minute 10K is just as important for that person, if not more important than the world record, you know?
Wow. Love that. Follow-up question. Can you share a particularly memorable moment or breakthrough with, and this can be with a high-profile athlete or just someone that you have put a lot of coaching into and a lot of investment in, that exemplifies your coaching style?
Yeah, I think if somebody was coached by me 4 years ago and says, I know how Bobby coaches, they would be wrong, because I changed so much so quickly, right? But I chose something that happened a long time ago with a professional athlete that I coached for 11 years. And I also chose something that happened more recently with an athlete that I coached for a very short period of time, right? So the first one is the athlete that I coached more recently, which is Jason West, who's, you know, arguably one of the best runners in the sport of T100 and 70.3. And Jason, out of the blue, put a post on Instagram saying, I've got to say I go completely with what Bobby McGee said in his book, Magical Running, that there's a very distinct difference between targets and goals, right? And that targets are markers that you set up the road, and they can be impacted by good circumstances and bad circumstances. They don't necessarily come to fruition, whereas goals are ways of being. And that if you're going to really be an athlete that sticks with the process, it's a being thing. You have to be a certain kind of person that is able to do the things you need to do. And the doing is chasing after targets, but the being are the goals. So I want to be patient. I want to be strong-willed. I want to be kind, or whatever those are. Nobody can take those away from you, no matter what the circumstances are. So that was very cool to see that. It just brought a little tear to my eye. Because while I was working with Jason, it was readily apparent that he didn't need run help. Had wonderful posture. He was a really powerful runner. I'd been working with him for years as a WTCS athlete before he went to long course, and he needed work on the bike. And there were better coaches out there than me on the bike, for sure. And that's, you know, we decided that would be a way better way for him to focus. The second story is way back in 1996 at the World Cross Country Championships. And the nice thing about the World Cross Country Championships in those days, it was like the World Cross Country Championships are now. In the interim, they used to be different distances, but now it's actually the greatest race on the planet, because all the track athletes, all the cross-country athletes, all the road athletes go to the World Cross Country Champs. So all of them get together in one race. The men run a 10K, the women run a 10K over rough terrain. And I coached an athlete for many years who would typically come, a good race would be 24th in the World Cross Country Championships at that time. So she was going really well. I expected her to do very well. We got to a point where she really believed that she could go for a medal. And just before the race, somebody said to her, let's see if you can get into the teens, right? And it kind of messed up everything that we were working on. And so we went to work again, looking at who the girls were, what kind of tactics she would need. Ended up, she lost a sprint finish for the bronze medal, and she came 5th in the World Cross Country Championship, which is a massive breakthrough for her. And I was just walking past the stage. This happened to be in Stellenbosch in South Africa, the World Cross Country Championships that year. And I happened to be walking past the stage while she was being interviewed on national television. And all I heard was, I finally ran a race according to my coach's opinion of my ability rather than my own opinion. And that always kind of stuck with me, that we tend to put ourselves down and not give ourselves the benefit of the objective facts of our preparation, right? We need somebody to tell us, and we need to buy into that, and we need to race according to that belief system. So it's been a useful story for me ever since.
Yeah, I love that she had the self-awareness to see that you have an objective party that can hold up a mirror and say, hey, listen, these are the things that you've shown that you are capable of doing. Let me just remind you. I love that that was that actualization there.
All right. So I know there are a lot of people that really want to get into a conversation about running mechanics and troubleshooting their running form. So, Bobby, you've always emphasized the importance of running mechanics in performance and injury prevention. What are the most common mechanical flaws that you see in runners of any ability? And what are some of the essential drills to address those or prevent those issues?
Yeah. So from the time I prepared for this little chat of ours to now, I changed my mind. So just to illustrate what I was saying previously. Neither of them are less relevant, but one of them remained the same. And so one of the most common things I see are people braking, putting on the brakes. And so if people understand that from the time you put your foot down until your foot gets underneath your body, that's your catch phase, that's your protection phase, that's your putting down phase. There's no direct propulsion going on at that phase. The propulsion starts from underneath you to out the back, right? That's the unloading phase. And so if you're a heel striker, sure, your shin can be leaning ever so slightly backwards because you're more of a pivot runner. But just looking at any video of yourself at any speed, you're looking for that vertical shank. You're looking for that when your foot starts to bear weight, your tibia should be standing upright, should be vertical. And there's a number of things that you can do with that. And mostly realizing that if you're running with the mindset of reaching to make up distance, that's problematic. You should be running with the mindset of getting your foot down quickly. And the quicker you get your foot down, a whole lot of really good things happen. Your legs stiffen, all of those kind of things. So any of the drills that teach you to put your foot down quickly, so whether it's A-skips or whether it's pulling a tire or whether it's pushing a wall or it's dribbles or it's skip exchanges, any one of those drills that are causing you to power those feet down as opposed to reaching are good negators of putting on that braking moment. And it doesn't matter whether you're a heel striker or a midfoot striker. So that would be the one. The second thing that I finally came up with is something that I see very often, and it's the concept of muscling the run. And it happens so much more in triathlon than what it happens in running, right? So you in the water and you anchoring, you're trying to get this biggest distance per stroke you possibly can, right? And you are contracting your muscles to pull yourself through the water. Similarly, on the bike, you're getting over the top of that pedal stroke and then you're just mashing that pedal down. Quads are contracting, glutes are contracting, hamstrings are contracting. All of those things are shortening, right? And then when you get to the run, the type of muscle movement is eccentric. So if you're bending your knees a lot when you're putting your feet down and you're dropping into the ground, you're bringing in all that concentric motion, the shortening motion, right? So you're landing on the ball landing on the ground like a basketball without air in it, right? So it requires a lot of work to try and bounce that basketball, right? So that muscling of the run, thinking that your propulsion takes place by pushing along the ground, is absolutely incorrect. Your propulsion comes from stiffening your leg down. So hard work is putting your foot on the ground. Once it's stiffened, the tendons have got it. The muscles are stabilizing the joints. They're not propelling you forward, all right? And so teaching people to stiffen their legs against the ground, not let their pelvis drop too much so that they beat with their foot, they beat gravity to the ground before their pelvis starts to drop, or, shades of gray of that, just make it light gray instead of dark gray. All right, so that would be definitely, and it's very easy to see. The cadence is down. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of, rolling around, really trying to move yourself forward, and you see this a lot. And then the last one is more situational. Is people losing their form late in a race, and that's a very good thing, because it means at some point in time you had it. And you lost it because of fatigue. You didn't lose it because you don't have the skill or the coordination or the balance. You lost it because you were fatigued. And what I do for athletes there is I help them to differentiate between their central conditioning, which is oxygen, food, liquids, nutrition, all of those things, as opposed to your peripherals. Your leg muscles, your knee flexors, your knee extenders, same thing with your ankles, same thing with your low back, your hips, and so on. They need extra work. It doesn't matter how much you run. Running is not enough. You start off so impaired off the bike, right? That's why running a marathon and an Ironman is so much less physically hard than running a fresh marathon, because you just don't have the strength to hurt yourself. All right. So people realize, oh, wait a minute, I have to do a bunch of muscle endurance work for my legs so that I can utilize the cardiovascular endurance that I have worked so hard to get. As an Ironman athlete, I don't care who you are, you're never going to be running 125 miles a week. If you do, you're riding 3.5 hours a week. That's basically it, which is not enough, right? And so for people to realize that long, steep, calf-burning hikes are a really good way to develop that muscle endurance, that fat-burning capability, all of that sort of stuff. Maybe you can run for 90 minutes and you're capable of doing that. Maybe you can run for 2 hours and you're capable of doing that. But everybody's capable after that to go on a 2.5, 3 hour hike if they want to do an Ironman. And that is pure muscle endurance. The heart rate is down, the temperature, the core temperature is down, but you are mashing your legs over and over and over again. And that's giving you that muscle endurance later on. So maybe that's too much information, but those would be the three.
I'll bet you that's a great primer for questions to come from our audience.
Okay.
Well, with that, why don't we do this? We've been, thank you for giving us a time to ask some prepared questions. We have a few more in the hopper if we need them. But we're at a point where I'd love to open this up to the audience. If you would like to ask a question of Bobby, just come off mic. We'll see you come off mic and we'll call on you, or go ahead and put your question in the chat.
Hi, Bobby.
Hey, Mike.
Here. How do you help an athlete learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable?
Very good. Great question. I learned that statement from Gwen Jorgensen's coach in the lead up to the 2016 Olympics. So being comfortable with the uncomfortable comes down to that anti-fragility question. So I've just sent out a post to my athletes. I have a newsletter that I send my athletes called Atleha, which is a Zulu word for thrive. And what I did was I told them to name their ego dark side of their brain. All right, give it a name. Mine's name is Bender. All right. And so when things are starting to get difficult, Bender will speak up and start complaining and saying why we can't doing it. And so when you pick up this relationship in the second person or the third person, you say, Bender, listen, this is something I'm committed to. This is something I'm working on. This is the cost of doing business. All right. It's not a punishment. It's not anything. It's a voluntary situation. Let's work on getting used to this. Because the truth is, if you get used to this, you will be better. And you will, on the other side of this, have something else you'll now have to get used to. And that's the Nike thing of there is no finish line, right? Because beyond that, there's always that and always that. And so when people get to contextualize what's uncomfortable for them, and they can make it temporary, and they can realize that it's a voluntary experience, then they have some facility to work with that. It's very much more a mental question than anything else. But from a brain physiology standpoint, it's also useful when you realize somebody's actually afraid or something like that. Then they're in a part of their brain where they can't overcome that, right? They are fearful. And you have to bring them back. Like if you're working with somebody with PTSD or something like that, you have to bring them back to a part of their brain that is logical, wants to push forward, has a view to what they're trying to achieve from a success standpoint. And that should be very useful, Mike.
Thank you.
Mike, thanks for the question. That's great. And thanks, Bobby, for the answer. All right, anybody else? I know from talking to some of you that you do have questions. There's Carrie. All right, go, Coach Carrie.
Right. I have, I got to do Ironman U, your workshop there, which was amazing. And I'm just curious, for those of us who are getting more into some run coaching, what other resources do you find invaluable? Where would you direct us to find out more?
You know, obviously having written a few books, I would say here's a book, there's a book. But nowadays the research is coming so thick and fast, all right? And then you always have that danger between the researchers who don't want to say anything in terms of suggestions unless it's evidence-based and it's a longitudinal study with a lot of people in it, right? That your best bet is somebody that you speak to consistently. You really want, you saw in the Ironman U one that I did on running mechanics that I suggest a team, right? You've got a physician in there, a biomechanist in there, a PT in there, and the coach sits on top of that. So it's a team-based approach, all right? But the beauty with running is that ever since research has started in running, the biggest force accelerator is consistency. So if you can run for an hour, but you can only do it once every 4 days, you're way better off running for 15 minutes, 4 days in a row. All right. And creating that kind of consistency. So looking for resources is more in terms of somebody that shares your goals, is honest with you, keeps you on track, and is not afraid to go to expert resources if they're not an expert themselves. But very often somebody who cares is a better bet than somebody who knows.
Coach Carey, I'll lend you my book. It actually even has some flags in here. I'll take the flags out before I send it to you.
Notes too. Notes in the margin.
Magical Running by Bobby McGee, if you didn't gather.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else, please? We've got some time. So this is a great opportunity.
I have a question.
Wonderful. All right.
Okay.
Let's go, Christy.
It's okay. Coach Bobby, thanks so much for taking time to speak with us. Every time I listen to you, I learn so much. And I'm pretty new to triathlon. I'm just getting ready to do my first 70.3 under the guidance of Coach Rich. And my question is, I use the TriDot app under the guidance of Coach Rich, and the AI has these runs that I go on. And if I do the run when I'm on my treadmill, I do not struggle with the sprints at all. I'm able to meet the AI requests of my abilities, but when I'm outside running and it wants me to sprint and it says I have these abilities, I really struggle to meet those same AI expectations. Are there drills or a way to really close that gap?
It's an absolutely brilliant question. It is pretty multifaceted though, right? So again, back to this concept that when you are on a treadmill, the treadmill is moving and you are stationary, right? You're moving on the treadmill. So there's a slight mechanical difference. So when you're on a treadmill, the first thing that I recommend to get your circumstances a little bit more real world, is to jack that treadmill's elevation up by about 1%. And that will mimic what's going on outside on the road a little bit better. The other part is we've actually alluded to that. When you run outside, balance becomes more of an issue. You don't have those two railings on either side of you. If you're new to the sport, a large part of your brain's work is going to be going towards keeping you safe. So you tend to be a little upright. If there's low light, you tend to step a little higher. All right. And you're just a little bit more cautious of your surroundings and all that kind of thing. And so you can't bring the same level of unified focus to the workout. And it takes a little bit of time and experience to be able to do that. So the treadmill can sometimes mislead you in terms of your real world ability, right? But stick with it, learn, and become experienced outside. And, start off on a track or something like that has a perfectly uniform surface, where your balance is better, where your traction is better. Remember, if you're running outside on a dirt road, it can be as much as 10% slower than running on an asphalt road. So all of those things come into play, Christy.
Wonderful. All right, we have some questions from the audience in the chat. I'll read Mike Levinson's first. I know in the Ironman U course, you mentioned Stride, power meters. How do you find that using Stride has helped your athletes today over a few years ago before Stride was available? I'm a longtime Stride user.
Fantastic. Mike, that's a really, really good question, right? So we know that power on the bike came about as a result of momentum, right? You're just flying down the hill using almost no power at all. Gravity's hurtling you down the road. And then similarly, when you're going up the road, you have that situation where you have that decoupling, right? So your heart rate keeps going up and your power starts to fade and you start going slower on the downhill, and heart rate becomes less of a useful tool. So they came up with power. The only difference is that power was from a strain gauge. It was an actual power number. We don't have an axle that we're working with on the run, so they had to come up with an algorithm. Stride was the best when they came up with not only a gyroscope and an accelerometer, but they put a magnetometer in there as well. So the data is step to step. So it's very good data. But the big thing about Stride, and we were going to deal with it later, but I took too long to answer my question, is that it's an external output number. It's not like a rev counter, like a heart or an effort, right? It's actually what are you putting out? So if you're running 7-minute miles on the asphalt and you're running 7.7 miles, 6.3 miles on the gravel, your power is the same, you're getting the same workout. There's a couple of mechanical differences because you're going slower, but generally speaking, it's so much easier to measure your work. And then with an electronic anemometer, you can go out and do a run into a slight wind that you might not even have noticed, and suddenly you pops up and you had a significant little headwind you were running into, and it can help you better quantify your data. So it's just another very accurate, very useful microscope that shows you a little bit more detail, or a lot more detail, about what you're doing. And especially in our world where efficiency is at play, it's really difficult to figure out how efficient you are mechanically if you don't have something like a Stride device.
And Coach Bob, if you don't mind, I'm just going to add, Chester, I'm going to ask both of your questions. We're going to ask your second one first. As a follow-up to that, Chester has been a single Stride user, single pod for many years. Yep. Is the Duo worth it? Do you get additional benefits and additional data that really help make a difference?
I would definitely say so, especially if you tend to struggle with injuries, or you tend to be, I don't even want to use that word anymore because it's a derogatory word, but you tend to be a little less coordinated, right? And you're trying to discover, is there asymmetry that you should be paying attention to? So the Duo is very, very useful. It's as useful as it is in swimming to have those pods in the palms of your hands that show your pathway, right? So you can see from those two boat shapes where you're viewing the the data from the two stride pods from the top, you can see, oh, one leg's going out a little wide. I'm maybe not flexing that leg. It's not coming around as much as I should. Should I be working on hip stabilization? Should I be working on stabilizing my groin, my medial hamstrings? It is very, very useful in that way. So the single pod is very good from a physiological standpoint. It almost does everything you need, but from a mechanical standpoint, the duo is not a bad idea at all. It really gives you some extra data to look at, right? And like in all of skills, having a visual of how you move can be really, really useful.
Thank you, Chester, for that one. And then follow up also from Chester, any tips on helping athletes keep their heart rate in zone 2 on their easy run? And I have a follow-up to that, which is, and how long does it really take to start to see the benefits of that zone 2 heart rate running if you're consistent with it?
Yeah. Two very, very good questions, right? So when you feel that you are drifting out of zone 2 and getting into that gray zone, it's important to discuss what zone 3 is, right? And zone 3 is not a physiological number. It's just a space between the top end of your zone 2 and the bottom end of your zone 4, right? And so zone 4 is very, very clearly delineated by an elbow, and you've got and zone 2 is actually called LT. Zone 4 is actually called LT2 as opposed to LT1, which is tempo. Human beings, from a mechanical standpoint, want to actually run in zone 3. They need the speed, they need the rhythm, they need the resistance of effort to work against. So zone 2 is actually an acquired skill, and it takes a while to get used to zone 2. Now, the big bugbear for zone 2, especially in triathlon, is cardiac drift. As your core temperature goes up, so your heart rate goes up. But your heart rate is not going up to support your physical activity. Your heart rate is going up to keep you cool. It's shunting blood to the surface of your skin. So on a hot day, your heart rate might be 10, 12 beats higher for the same performance as what it would be on a cool day if it was 55 versus 75, for example. All right. So the thing to do is, if you're really doing zone 2 training, is just try and slow down, just keep accommodating for zone 2, but don't drift into zone 3. And a good way to keep up a good pace is to just use the run-walk method, because the run-walk method just keeps dropping that heart rate, keeps your average in zone 2. It's just a much easier thing to do. Now, the last thing is, what does zone do? I was looking at Pogacar the other day, and he was saying that when he's fresh, his zone 2 is like 145 to 155, and when he's fatigued, it's 155 to 165, right? So it's a pretty big window for his zone 2, right? And they're working that off lactate. So the primary reason why you do zone 2, right, is to develop the size of your mitochondria. There's even some research that suggests you might be increasing the number of mitochondria that you have, because as we get older, they decrease in size and we lose them, right? So that is a physiological process, right? But zone 2 has a lot of neuromuscular connections as well, right? If you're doing a movement that's an easy movement, but you're doing it for a very, very long time, it's still going to have that muscle endurance fatigue. It's going to be neurologically challenging, right? So there's a multiplicity of benefits that you get from zone 2. And if you're doing proper zone 2 training, you will know that zone 2 is working because your zone 2 velocity is going to go up. You're going to gradually go up. But I would say probably in the region of about at least 6 weeks, but probably more like 3 months before you're going to get these really big benefits, right? I like to draw a distinction between endurance block of training versus your base training. And your base training is your lifetime accrual of endurance work, whereas your endurance block is this current 6 weeks that you're working on. So your zone 2 over years is what's your most beneficial. It's back to that thing that I told you, Caroline, about it's about consistency. You know, if you, whatever environment you can find that you can be consistent in, both internally and externally, that's the best environment for you.
Well, that was fabulous, Bobby. We have a couple more questions and then we will wrap up. And this is coming to you from Coach Carey. There has been so much development within our sport, from new technologies to better understanding of human physiology to new events and series. Can you share what new development or developments that you are most excited about right now?
Yeah, I think probably the power thing. I know power has been around for a long time, but as it becomes more refined, I really like that new development. I also like, and it's much more subtle, I like the fact that elite athletes have known this for a long time, but that age groupers are now starting to realize that you need mental skills training over and above performance psychology, right? And above normal psychology. Mental skills training is an edge. It's to help you get more out of yourself. It's mental skills training and sports psychology is not because you are a quitter or because you're a choker or whatever the case might be. No, it's a positive thing. Every pro athlete uses that in some way, shape, or form because they want an edge, not because they think there's anything wrong with them. And then talking about a series, I like the fact that we move to shorter stuff. So I like Super League and I like arena games and I like those kind of things, right? Because they are more athletic and they're more consumable, right? And I feel that with the longer events, if somebody comes to me and they say they want to train for a half marathon or they want to train for a 70.3 or they want to train for Olympic distance triathlon or something like that, I'm going, great. This is going to be physiologically very beneficial to you. Right? It's going to really help you. No, but I want to do an Ironman or I want to do a marathon. I'm going, okay, we can do that too. But I want you to know that that's not that beneficial for you. That's for your soul. That's for your spirit. You go and do these really, really long races, all right, because you want to go to another realm. You want to, you want to exercise the spiritual. You want to do this for your soul. They are generally too hard, right? I mean, there's a reason why the statistic for Ironman races is most people are one-timers. They train to do that once and then they're done. They'll go back to 70.3s or something else, but there's very few people that do 2 Ironman races a year for 20 years. That doesn't happen. But you get a lot of people who run 10Ks forever, So, just for that reason. So I just think that things like T100 and draft legal sprint races and those things should come to the average populace. Just the simple reason that I will spend $1,500 and then $2,000 on a plane ticket to go to an Ironman, but don't ask me to spend that kind of money to go down to Florida in the middle of the winter to run a 5K. That's just a waste of money. It's actually not. It's actually a really good idea, right? So, but I come from track, so to me, we've got to think like that too. But this park run is a proof of that, right? You have hundreds and thousands of people all over the world showing up in every shape, size, color, and form, and running a 5K in a park and getting their time recorded. I think that's just brilliant for humanity.
Oh, yes. So much wisdom in this conversation, Bobby. Thank you so much. Rich, do you think we have time for one more, or we want to close this up?
Well, let me ask Coach Bobby. We have one more question. This does not look like a short answer question.
Okay.
Do you want me to read it to you and then give it a shot?
I think is the one about the hills?
This is the one. I'm struggling with high activation of my calf muscles when running hills. Yep. This athlete has exertion compartmental syndrome and is looking for a way to maybe relieve that in their running form.
That would kill me as a coach if I can't have access to hills. So a couple of quick things, right? Have a look at the size of your posterior tib and have a look at the size of your gas drop and see if there's some way in how you perambulate, that you can decrease the size of those tissues, right? Because you'll notice that elite distance runners and elite sprinters, they have very small gastrocs and they have very big soli. All right, so they have big soleus muscles. And so if there's not enough room in there, even if you get massage and so on, which by the way does help, it can become a problem. You don't want to lose the benefit of heels. If you can do the same work on the flat and not have the same experience in your calves, right? And it also depends where it is. If it's just below the gastroc, then that's soleus. But if it's higher up towards your knee, all right, and you're feeling that compartment syndrome in the division of your gastroc, then you've got to really pay attention. It's a pretty serious condition, right? And there are release surgeries and things like that, but there's also quite a lot of rehabilitative, safe level 1 work that you can do to improve that. So bring the incline of the heel down, stay on the flats. Also look that you're not running up too high on your toes because your calves are just not quite long enough. Or you could also have some ankle blocks, right? And so now your calves are overworking to protect your ankles. So do a little bit of that ankle block work where you're putting a band across the front of your foot. But definitely get with a PT that knows what they're doing and work on that. I would not want you to lose heels as part of your regimen.
So thank you very much. A quick shout out, Coach Rich. Thank you for your coaching. For those that don't know, I went from not running and a few years ago, barely able to walk. I've had multiple surgeries to release compartment syndrome in all my extremities. And in the past 6 months, I've gone from not running at all to today I ran 7.5 miles to the Appalachian Mountains up and down hills. So thank you. Thank you very much.
That's amazing, Aaron. Wonderful. Thanks for saying that. Oh, wow. Coach April, you want to close us out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to follow up with Aaron, but that was amazing. Coach Bobby, you are just fantastic. This was a master class. I mean, we ran the gamut from mental training to running specific to the things individual athletes are experiencing. And we just want to say thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, expertise. You are just a treasure. So thank you so much.
You're all very, very welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
April, you going to stop the recording?
Yep, I'm just maneuvering. Here we
Gotcha.
go.